In this lecture, I am going to talk about various elements of communication system. A typical communication system starts with the concept of a source of information. Okay, which outputs the information of interest which you want to send somewhere. Okay, so typically this information will first have to be converted into electrical signal through an appropriate transducer. As I already mentioned in the previous lecture that you have a voice like acoustic pressure, that is, so that is first converted into an electrical signal through a microphone. That microphone is called transducer. The source of information after its electrical conversion is given to a system or some equipment. Okay, that equipment we typically call transmitter. I will explain these blocks one by one in detail a little while. Let me first complete the typical communication system and what are the blocks it contains, major blocks. Okay, so in the transmitter generally we do encoding, modulation and so on. Encoding is done here, then modulation is done here. So these are things that we do here. Some kind of distortion also added in this, and then you put in this to channel. So there are many different types of channels that we will see one by one. So then you have another block called receiver, and after that destination. So the arrow mark goes like this. Then in the receiver you do just reverse operation, encoding, then you do decoding here, modulation, you do demodulation here. So modulation is done at the transmitter, so do demodulation, and some distortion also added in this. In the channel also some noise will getting added, and that noise is noise source, noise. So this is a typical block diagram of our elements of communication system. So therefore a communication system will have 5 blocks like information source, transmitter, channel, receiver and destination. Okay, however from a practical design point of view, we are interested in only these 3 blocks, this one and this one. We don't much talk about the information source and the destination. Okay, so the transmitter, channel and the receiver, these are very important for us as a communication engineer, because we have a little control over the other 2 blocks. We don't mind actually who is talking and who is going to hear all those things. Our main purpose is to transfer the information from one place to the other. Suppose for an engineer who designs and manufactures a mobile phone, he least bother whether to sell this mobile phone to India or Pakistan or some other country. Okay, so we don't bother the information source and the receiver. So the communication electrical form takes place mainly in these 3 blocks. Okay, so these are the 3 blocks which are very important to take communication in electrical form. Now let us look at the functions of these blocks one by one. So the first block is the transmitter. So the job of the transmitter is to prepare this information for actual sending through some physical channel, that is some physical medium through which the propagation of information has to take place. The information has to travel. In a sense, the transmitter matches the characteristics of the signal which is coming from the information source to the characteristics of the medium. Suppose you start to speak, you have a mic, and that mic gives a voice signal, and this voice signal I cannot transmit to the channel. When I say channel, air can be a channel, vacuum can be a channel, then copper wire can be a channel. So there are many things. So you need to match the characteristics of the voice signal to the characteristics of the channel. So this matching can be done at the transmitter. So that effective or efficient transmission is possible. Okay. So now the information is now ready for putting into the channel, and the physical medium through which we transmit this information we will call the channel. So the channel is an abstraction here. When I say channel, it not only indicates the physical channel, but it also includes something else. So that is why we call abstraction. I will elaborate this, what we mean by abstraction. Okay, so the channel is an abstraction for every kind of physical medium through which we will transmit the information. At the other end we have the receiver. Okay, so after that we will after that we have the destination source. So we simply say that you have a receiver whose job is to ensure that the information is given to the user in a nice form. Okay, by removing the noise content, then amplifying the signal to an appropriate level so that it can drive the speaker or it can drive the monitor, right? So those things and all taken care by the receiver, so that you can interpret it properly. So really speaking, in a communication system there are 5 major blocks. Okay, so the job of the receiver, as I mentioned, is to undo some harmful degradations. So the channel will do some degradation. That degradation is noise. That might have taken place. Okay, while the signal has been transmitted through the channel, so there might be some attenuation. Therefore, the receiver will try to amplify the signal and remove the noise to a certain extent. You cannot remove completely, of course, and distortion may be eliminated a little bit. Okay, so these all are done at the receiver block. Okay, in addition to providing simple amplification, it also has to remove the noise content, as I said. It has to remove other kinds of interference also, because one channel will interfere with the other channel, or one signal will interfere with the intended signal. So therefore, to a certain extent, the receiver block has to remove the interference. We will study all these things in detail, but this is an introduction class. So introduction, about communication system. Then in overall view, in nutshell, I am talking now. So this is a typical block diagram of an information communication system. Okay, now let me spend a little more time on each of these blocks, block by block we will see, so that we get a better feel for each of these aspects of communication engineering. Let me start talking about information source. So there can be many kinds of sources of information. Our speech is one kind of information, right? Voice or speech. So 90% of the time our communication takes place through speech. Maybe that is true in up to 2004 or 5. Now 90% of the traffic is not voice, it is data. Things are changing rapidly these days. Okay, human communication takes place 90% of the time through voice communication, but these days people are not talking. Okay, so they are chatting, WhatsApp, then Facebook, this, that. So if you take present day traffic, data traffic across the internet, okay, so 97% or 98% is data, and remaining 1 or 2% is voice. So voice or speech, it forms the bulk of information once upon a time, not now. Of course, there is a picture transmission. Then picture transmission could be in the form of television signals, which is essentially moving pictures, moving at a normal pace at which life goes on. It could also be a still picture. Suppose you want to transmit some photograph, so it's a still picture. It could be a moving picture. Okay, so moving picture means, let me say, TV signal. Still picture I can transmit through your fax machine, Facsimile machine. Facsimile. So each of these information source has a different kinds of requirements from the communication system point of view, because the voice takes its own spectrum. Let me come to a little later what I mean by spectrum. Okay, the frequency range is different for speech, and the frequency range is different for still picture, and totally different, or bandwidth requirement of moving picture is different. Okay, so let us spend a few minutes on giving a feel for the various kinds of information sources that I have just mentioned. So this is not an exhaustive list, okay, but more or less it captures the essence of various types of information that we use in our day-to-day life activity. So one more information source, that is data, like from and to computers. Okay, from one computer to another computer. For example, the data that I'm talking here may not be from your computer. It may be the data that you are measuring by using telemetry instruments. Okay, we will be measuring the parameters of the ocean floor. You put some devices there, some sensors, some transducers across the bed of the ocean. The data, let us say the data about the temperature of a particular layer in the ocean as a function of time or something else. It produces that information and it transmits through some kind of communication systems. So it keeps on transmitting that information to an offshore station, maybe on a ship or be on the shore itself. So it could be telemetry. There are many, or from space or some satellite or whatever it is. So the communication can take place between the Earth station and the satellite. Like you can list out many. So let's talk about the information sources in some more detail. To start with, as I said, one of the most common sources of information for us is voice or speech. Human speech. We don't bother about the communication between animals. Okay, how they communicate, we don't know. Maybe some peculiar people might be knowing that. So we are primarily interested in human speech. When I say speech, human speech. So what are the important features of information sources which will be primarily relevant to the discussion on communication system? That is the spectral band. So what is the frequency range it occupies? That is called spectral band or the spectral occupancy. How much bandwidth it occupies. Okay, I believe you all are familiar with the concept of spectrum of a signal. Spectrum of a signal is nothing but in a rudimentary sense, the Fourier transform of a signal. Okay, you take a signal x of t and take Fourier transform, you will get x of j omega. So this is time domain and this is frequency domain. So the frequency domain we call spectrum. Suppose if you take a time domain deterministic signal, let's say x of t is equal to e to the x of t is equal to e to the minus at times u of t. If you take Fourier transform, then your transformed domain in the frequency domain, it is going to be 1 by a minus j omega. Okay, therefore its spectrum is just the Fourier transform of the signal. Of course, the Fourier transform of the real signal in general would be a complex entity. See, this is a real part, real signal, and in the transform domain this is complex. So if you take a real signal and take Fourier transform of that, then you will end up with a complex entity. Okay, so therefore whenever you have a complex entity, then it has imaginary part and real part. You multiply in the numerator and denominator by a plus j omega divided by a minus j omega, then it is a divided by a square plus omega square plus j times omega divided by a square plus omega square. So this is real part and this is imaginary part, and so on. Okay, then you can plot magnitude part and phase part, or you can take magnitude part and phase part, or real part and imaginary part. Okay, and you plot the plot of amplitude of the various frequency components as a function of frequency. Okay, in the x-axis frequency, and plot the magnitude of the spectrum. So that gives some magnitude plot, and also you can plot phase, like this is your frequency and this is your phase. So you have magnitude plot and phase plot for a real signal. Okay, so in the time domain it is a real signal, in the frequency domain it is a complex signal. When you have complex, then obviously we need to talk in terms of the language of magnitude and phase. If it is a non-deterministic signal, that is if it is a random signal, it is usually better to talk not about the spectrum of the signal but about the power spectrum of the signal. If the signal is deterministic, then we will talk in terms of spectrum, and if it is non-deterministic, then we will talk in terms of power spectrum. So we will not be interested in magnitude, but we will be interested in power, frequency versus power. So this is called a power spectrum. I believe that you at least I believe that you are familiar with these terms. At the moment, that familiarity is enough, but we will take up these issues as and when required later in more detail. So as I said, the spectral occupancy of a signal is one of the important attribute that we need to look at when we are talking about communication signals, because what is the bandwidth that a particular signal requires, that is very, very important. Spectral occupancy. And for a human being speech signal, we see that the spectrum has this kind of typical, okay, like this occupancy. It builds up from low energy. So let's say this is a low energy point, okay, and at the lower energy, okay, it builds up from the low energy, that is at the lower frequency end. This is a lower frequency end, and keep on goes to the higher frequency end. And typically for telephonic communication, the lower frequency end is 300 Hz for human being voice, and upper higher frequency end is 3300 Hz. And this is a power spectrum. Power spectrum is denoted by S of omega. That is a notation for power spectrum. And it is a function of frequency omega, angular frequency. If I plot a power spectrum, then there is no question of phase. Okay. Because power spectrum only gives information about the distribution of the power with respect to frequency as a function of frequency. And typically power spectrum is a tool that we employed when we are talking about random signals. If it is a deterministic signal, then magnitude spectrum. So if you model the speech as a random signal, in fact it is not really all that random if you take a speech signal, although there is some randomness in it. Of course, let us assume our speech signal is a random signal. So one can see that the power spectrum looks something like this of a typical speech signal. Okay, it slowly goes up like this and reaches a peak value, and it starts from the lower energy at the lowest frequency end. This is the lowest frequency end, and it goes to some peak value, let's say peak value, or some peak energy at about a few hundred hertz, maybe let's say some 1500 hertz, like this or so. Rough. It varies from person to person. It is not the plot, okay, which will vary from speaker to speaker, and it vary from the information that you are speaking. Even the same person speaks, sometimes he speaks very loudly and sometimes he speaks very slowly and with a normal pace, so then also it changes. So this spectrum is not really fixed. First of all, please understand, this is not a fixed spectrum for all voice signal. It varies from voice to person or speaker to speaker. It's a typical plot that you might see. So as you see, there will be a major peak. So here is one peak and here is one peak. There are some peaks in the spectrum. But on the whole, the spectrum will start decaying after a few hundred hertz. See, after that it is slowly decaying. For telephonic communication, it is found, the researchers have done enormous research on this, that if you concentrate on the energy between 300 hertz to about 3300 hertz, you can capture most of the intelligence as well as essence of the speech. That means quality of the speech. Okay, therefore, without losing much on either intelligence and quality of the speech. So for most telephonic communication purposes, the band from 300 Hz to 3300 Hz is the one which is very important. So that is why we say the voice band channel has a bandwidth of about 4 kHz. That 4 kHz includes some God band, that is some additional frequency band, to make sure that we do not lose anything. So typically the band of a speech signal is provided to be less than 4 kHz. But I must mention that this is not the actual bandwidth of a speech signal. Okay, actual bandwidth or actual energy plot extends beyond 4 kHz, and it goes up to 7 or 8 kHz. But we don't bother. But it is found to be adequate if I consider up to 4 kHz. So I would like to say something more about this. So what can I say more about it? I like to say speech signal is highly studied signal over many decades. It is a signal which has been extensively researched by many researchers, as I said, for various reasons. Like it has been researched by linguists for their research to understand the nature of the language, the way they are spoken, the way they are perceived by the people. But from the communications point of view, the amount of information that is being conveyed by the signal is not necessarily proportional to the bandwidth of the signal. Let's say if the bandwidth is up to 8 kHz, let's say 0 to 8 kHz, the amount of information is not directly proportional to the bandwidth. So there is a less connection or less dependency between the amount of information and the bandwidth. That will be very clear when you come across, when you go to the higher, semesters, especially in statistical theory of communications or, digital communications. For the time being, this is the point you should remember. Okay, in the later course, we will learn a little later that bandwidth is a very, very important attribute of a communication system. It's a very important resource, bandwidth. Okay, if the signal has more bandwidth, it will occupy more bandwidth somewhere in the spectrum of communication signals, and it will disallow other signals to be transmitted in that frequency band, because the frequency band is already occupied by this particular signal. Therefore, bandwidth becomes a very important resource for a communication engineer. So we will learn that there are two main resources which are very, very important. Okay, so those two important parameter or attributes are, the first one is bandwidth and the second one is power. These two are very, very important attribute. Okay, so the first one is the bandwidth available to us, because a large number of people want to communicate with each other. Everybody has to work in some band or the other and it becomes obvious that if they all start talking together, that is, if they all start transmitting information simultaneously in the same frequency band, then there is going to be a lot of problems. The signals will mingle each other and crippled, and finally you'll hear some junk, some distorted version of the transmitter signal. So they are not going to be able to hear each other. So they are just going to hear some junk which is not very desirable. So bandwidth is very, very important resource for a communication engineer. And the second one is power. Okay, so the amount of power that the transmitter outputs is a very important attribute in a communication system. You cannot indefinitely increase the power. We may have to transmit a large power if you want to send the signal to a large distance, that is the long distance. But at the same time, a large power output of a transmitter is not necessarily a very nice thing to do, because it will go and interfere with the other signal. For example, if the transmission is taking place from the satellite that you have sent up there, see, this is your earth station, and there is a satellite, and the satellite is situated around 36,000 kilometer between earth and the satellite. Okay, then the satellite may not have much power to transmit. Okay, the amount of power that is going to be available to you for sending is going to be limited by the power that you have in the satellite. So this is a limitation, so you cannot increase the power indefinitely. But more importantly, when you put a large power in the transmitter output, it has a potential to interfere with the other signals. Therefore, power is a very important resource. You should use it very wisely. The smaller the power that you use, the better or the more efficient your communication system is. For example, you are designing a mobile phone and make sure that it consumes very less amount of power, otherwise your battery will be drained quickly. You need to recharge the battery frequently. So these days people are asking what is the battery capacity of the mobile phone, how long the battery lasts. These are the typical questions people generally ask. So these are things that we need to remember. And one more thing, the power constraint that I would like to mention is, like in mobile phone communication, the entire geographical area is divided into sectors, like hexagonal sectors. I am not drawing the figure clear nicely. My drawing is very bad. Okay, so let's say this is a mobile phone tower, the cell tower, and you are in this place. So this tower transmits a signal and it reaches here. Suppose if you let me elaborate. Suppose you put more power on the transmitter, then what happens? The signal will go to the next cell and interferes there. Okay, so you cannot increase the power indefinitely. Okay, if you transmit a large power, you may have a significant component of that frequency in a relatively distant area in the neighboring cell, where the frequency band has been allotted to somebody else, Okay, here one range of frequency is allotted to you, and the same frequency is allotted to somebody else in the neighboring cell or somewhere distant from you. So then it will go and interfere if you increase the power. So therefore it has a potential to interfere with the other signal which are operating the same frequency band. So this concept you will be studying in the upcoming semester. Okay, so and then let us talk about a little bit about the TV signals. The two kinds of picture signals that we talked about is the first one is TV signal, and the second one is Fresnel signal. Okay, so the TV signal is a moving picture signal. When it is a moving picture signal, then you have to make sure that you do not lose the essence of motion, because the picture is moving, the frame by frame it is moving. So as I said, you have to first convert the signal into an electrical signal, which will be done through a TV camera over through an optical lens system, which captures the picture and then somehow convert this into an electrical signal. This signal is a two-dimensional signal. It has two spectral coordinates. But ultimately, when I'm going to transmit is a time. Okay, what I'm going to transmit is a time signal. So I will convert this spatial information into temporal information. When I say temporal, what I mean is related to time. Temporal. So I must make sure that the time taken to scan a complete picture line by line is sufficiently small. So that I do not lose if the picture changes because of the motion. I must be able to capture the motion also. I must be able to scan sufficiently fast for this. If I don't scan it sufficiently fast, then I may not be able to capture the motion. So that I do not lose the essence of motion also. Otherwise, it will look like a transmission of a few still pictures, one after another, rather than a moving picture. So this is very, very important. So therefore, it will clear that the scanning will be fast. If the scanning is fast, it essentially means that the signal that we transmit will have a large bandwidth. Okay, at fast pace you are scanning it, that means the frequency also large, frequency also high, therefore the bandwidth also high, because the bandwidth is related to the rate of variations of the signal. If you are scanning it at a very fast rate, it will lead to very large bandwidth signal. So I am just giving you information. This is a point, this is a good point for comparison with your voice signal. As I said, for your voice, the bandwidth is from 300 Hertz to 3300 Hertz. But if you take your TV signal, I mean your video signal, the bandwidth is 4.5 megahertz. It is 3.3 kilohertz. This is megahertz. Here 10 to the 3 and here 10 to the 6. So as you can see that it is 3 orders of magnitude higher than the bandwidth of the speech signal. So the bandwidth requirements of picture signal will be much higher than the bandwidth requirements of a voice signal, and therefore the communication system that you have designed for voice signals will be absolutely no use to us when it comes to transmitting TV signals or moving picture signal, even your channel itself. So you can communicate voice through a pair of copper wires. You might have noticed there are many wires hanging across the building or from town to town, okay, telephone lines. So that lines you cannot use it for transmitting your TV signal, because the bandwidth requirement of your TV signal is much higher. On the other hand, if I am transmitting a still picture, you want to scan some document and send it to somebody else, or you want to scan your photograph and send it to others, so then I don't want very high bandwidth. Okay, so if I want to transmit in still pictures, then I have less constraint. I can scan it very slowly, it's not an issue. So there is no requirement that I must scan it very fast. I can scan it slowly, make it compatible with the bandwidth that I have available in the communication system. That is precisely what you do in a fax machine. That is the reason I can transmit the fax signal through a telephone line, but you cannot transmit your TV signal through telephone lines. Okay, because the telephone line is designed to carry only 4 kilohertz of bandwidth. Because the rate of scanning is under my control, I can scan it very dead slow, or I can scan it very fast. It's not an issue. If I scan it very fast, I can transmit quickly. My job will be get done very quickly. If I scan it very slow, then I may spend little more time. It's not an issue. Okay, but this is not possible in the moving picture. If you scan it slowly in the moving picture, then what will happen? You lose the motion. Okay, because the picture might have moved to some other place. So you might have to scan sufficiently fast rate for the case of picture signal. Okay, in the still picture, the rate of scanning is under our control, and there is no particular requirement from the point of nature of the picture itself that I want to scan it. Of course, as I said, if I scan it fast enough, there is an advantage. What is the advantage? I will occupy the communication source for less amount of time. Anyway, of course, I need to pay less amount of bill for that. I can scan it fast and send it fast. That is there. But from the nature of the picture itself, there is no such requirement. I can scan it at a sufficiently slow rate, so that at least it is possible to transmit the FSML through the telephone line, and that's why FSML signal transmission is possible over the telephone line, whereas the TV signal transmission is obviously not possible over the telephone line, although there are new techniques which will again compress this, like I talked about the compression of the bandwidth of the speech signal. Okay, so as I said, the bandwidth of your TV signal is 4.5 megahertz. And the next one is data. Okay, so the last thing that I would like to say something about is data sources. The sources like TV signals, speech signal, then your fax machine, this all are called analog sources, because the nature of the output that produces are analog signals. Okay, so these sources are basically different from the data sources, okay, in one major way. Okay, these are all called analog sources. An analog signal is a one in which there is continuous variation. Data is basically digital. Digital means there is a binary variations, either +1 or -1. Okay, but in continuous time signal there is a continuous variation of signals like this. Theoretically, it can take any value between from +infinity to -infinity. Anyway, no one can talk with infinite amplitude. Let's say the amplitude is varying from +k and -k. Whereas in digital, the signal values that the signal can take are just two, let's say +1 or -1. But here it is continuously changing. Here only take binary set of values, and here infinite set of values continuously takes. Suppose if I sample at this point, I cannot say 4 volt, it may be 4.001532 like this. I can say I cannot do the round off. That's what we mean by continuous. But here it takes only binary value. It can binary means it is 2. It could be 4 also. 4 level signal also I can transmit, like 2 level, one more level. Let's say this is +1, +2, then -1, -1, maybe I can do like this, and -2. So how many levels are there? First level, 1 level, second level, and third level, and 4 level signals are there. So this will this will come in digital communication. There we will study in detail. So just for the sake of completeness, I am giving this one here. So it could be a 4 level signal in the discrete case, it could be 8 level, it could be 16, and so on and so forth. That means what essentially I am trying to say is it could be a set of discrete values. Even it could be 16 levels or 256 levels, it doesn't matter. The moment you have discrete levels, it becomes a digital signal, that's it. So that's what essential difference between analog and digital sources. However, we must remember that the physical medium through which you are going to transmit information is not digital in nature. Even though digital, you cannot transmit this signal as it is. Okay, the physical medium, for example, let's say the free space or the cable, it looks at the signal as a voltage waveform or the voltage waveform as a function of time. So at the end of day, you are going to transmit everything in terms of voltage, and the channel hardly bothers whether it is a continuous range or a height or continuous time signal or whether it is a discrete time signal. The channel treats the signal the same way irrespective of the signal, whether it is continuous time signal or the digital signal. So that is the thing we should remember, and we should match the signal with the characteristics of the channel itself. Therefore, the real medium is analog. The medium is always analog, like in terms of voltages and currents. If you take copper wire, if you take free space, in terms of fields, electric fields and magnetic fields. If you take wire, I mean copper wire or coaxial cable, then the signal is in terms of continuous voltages, voltage and current. Then if you take a optical cable, then in terms of light pulses. If you take free space or air, then it is electric fields and magnetic fields, E and H. Therefore, the real medium is analog. It has some advantages. Okay, so we have some advantages if we will work with a digital formulation of our signal, but anyway, at the end of the day, you need to convert digital to analog before you transmit. So digital communication, which is a follow-up subject of this analog communication. Okay, so and the next block is transmitter. Now let us discuss a little more detail about the issue of the transmitter. Now, as I said in the previous lecture, the job of transmitter is to modify the message signal such that it can travel for a long distance. So what are the basic functions of the transmitter? As I mentioned earlier, like the basic functions of the transmitter is it has to match the characteristics of the signal source with the channel characteristics through which signal has to be finally transmitted. Okay, so when I say matching the characteristics, what do we mean by that? Let us take an example. Let's say you want to use free space as a medium through which your signal must be transmitted. In this case, the transmitter has to radiate information into free space. So you have transmitter. So the radiation takes place through an antenna. The antenna is denoted by a triangular symbol. Like this. antenna. In that, okay, if that is the case, the transmitter have to radiate information into free space. So it essentially means that you have a built-in mechanism, something called an antenna. That antenna radiates. So this is a schematic representation of the antenna in a typical communication system block diagram. But physically, the antenna could be one of many types, depending on what frequency range you are working with. Now the question is, let's say you are transmitting a voice signal. Let's say the 4 kilohertz frequency. Okay, so the antenna radiates electrical signal in terms of voltage and currents to electric fields and magnetic fields. So one side you have voltages and currents, and the other side you have electric fields and magnetic fields. You know that the efficiency of the radiation of the antenna will depend on the size of the antenna, which is related to its wavelength. The wavelength is, let's say 10 meters. That is the wavelength of the electromagnetic wave that you are working with is 10 meters. Then for efficient transmission of information into free space, we require an antenna size at least in that order of 5 to 10 meters. Otherwise, it will not radiate. Now, let us find out the wavelength of this 4 kilohertz. For the sake of simplicity, let me take 3 kilohertz. So lambda is equal to velocity by frequency, velocity in the free space. So that is 3 times 10 to the 8 meters per second, and this frequency is 3 times 10 to the power of 8 per second. Second will get cancelled. Hertz is number of cycles per second. Then this 3 will get cancelled, and sorry, this is 10 power 3, right? 3 kilohertz. So 10 power 5. So 10 power 5 meters. So that is 100 times 10 power 3, which is 100 kilometers. So in order to radiate your voice signal, your antenna size should be 100 kilometer. So it is practically impossible. It is about 100 kilometers. How do you design an antenna and fabricate it? It's not possible. Unless you have an antenna of the order of 100 kilometers, it is impossible to radiate it. So you can see that there is a problem here. I want to transmit a voice signal through free space by radiation, but the antenna size is very, very large in dimension. I will simply be not possible to have such an antenna. So what do I have to do? I have to make sure that the voice signal is first embedded onto some other signal which has very high frequency, so that the antenna size requirement is much smaller. So that is the concept of carrier. So the carrier comes into the picture. So these all things are happening in the transmitter. So therefore, typically the transmitter would require another input to it in addition to the signal. So the transmitter, the input is your message signal from the information source, and one more input you need, that input is carrier. These two are mingled, and what you get, something is called modulated signal. So that the frequency is very high. If the frequency is high, then the antenna size drastically comes down. For example, if the frequency is some 100 megahertz, then your wavelength is equal to 3 times 10 to the 8 divided by 100 times 10 to the 6. And then this is going to be 10 to the 2, and this and that will get cancelled. So it is 3 meters. So it is of the order of 3 meters. So 3 meters of length of designing an antenna is not a problem at all. Therefore, what you do is the transmitter has to put this information appropriately or embed this information appropriately into this carrier in order to reduce the antenna size. And typically this is done through a process of what is called modulation. So you modulate a specific parameter of the carrier along with the signal. So that we will discuss elaborately as we go along in the course. And in the then you put the modulated signal into the channel, and there are different sources that we will discuss a little later, like the channels are like pair of copper wires coaxial cable, then waveguides. Again in the waveguides you have rectangular waveguide, circular waveguide, then elliptical waveguides. There are many types. Then fiber optic cable, then air and vacuum. That's it. These are all different channels through which the transmitter transmits the modulated signal. Okay, and after that the channel you give it to the receiver block diagram, and the receiver will undo the different types of distortions, removes the distortions and removes the noise to certain extent. Of course it cannot remove the distortion completely, and then give it to the intended user. So this is a typical block diagram of our communication system, various elements of communication system. So primarily we will be interested in these three blocks: transmitters, channel and receiver. These three are very, very important for us. Okay, we don't spend much time, or we don't bother about information source and destination. Okay, so let me stop at this point. In the next lecture I will talk about need for modulation. Thank you very much.